I want to introduce our first live guest, Miriam Barry. So Miriam is a founding board member of CBTF. She's a parent of a survivor. And if I was going to pick 4 words to describe Miriam, I would say kind, selfless, I would say committed, and 4th is tenacity. So Miriam, welcome.
So true. We're so glad that you're here with us today, Miriam. And I know CBTF would not be what it was today if it wasn't for you and the multiple roles you've played at CBTF since its inception, including, we found the other day, editor of the first CBTF newsletter, The Challenge, multiple roles on the board, including as our current secretary, and just sharing your personal and professional wisdom. We're so happy to have you here. But before we jump into CBTF history, Miriam, why don't you share about your family in 1988?
Okay, so 1988, I was a young mom of 5 kids. My second child was diagnosed with brain tumor. After a week of just going to the doctor so many times, finally we ended up in the emergency room, and it was a tumor. And, just trying to figure out, it was 1988. There wasn't any internet. There weren't even cell phones. MRI machines were scattered throughout the city. There was no MRI machine in the hospital where my daughter was. And it was a scramble to figure out what to do. We ended up at NYU Medical Center with Dr. Jeffrey Wissoff. She had surgery. And 10 days later, we're sitting in the doctor's office. And the first words out of his mouth are, "It's more malignant than we thought." And you think that that's the worst thing you could possibly hear coming out of a doctor's mouth, but that wasn't it. The next sentence was even more chilling, and that was, "And we really don't know what to do about it," because there was no research. I remember Dr. Jeff Allen saying there are 100 articles, journal articles on this particular tumor, and we don't know how to treat it. We'll try. We'll treat it like another similar tumor, hope for the best. I asked them about her chances, and they said, well, 50-50. They really couldn't tell me. It was quite devastating to know that there was no research on this. It was 1988. I thought it was, modern times. Looking back, obviously not, but it was really quite scary. But my daughter was treated. She had radiation chemotherapy. She was able to get back to school. She was 12. My daughter was 12 years old at the time. Went back to school, finished high school, spent a year overseas for a gap year, and then went to college. And I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I got married, has children, and it's been a journey, but I think we kind of, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in between. But I think the thing about 1988 was there was no support of anything. There was nothing. If I wanted to get counseling, I had to find where that was. If I wanted support for the siblings, I had to find that. There really was nothing available for families. You were on your own. You were in the clinic. You were in the clinic, and there was somebody there you could talk to them. That was pretty much it.
So Miriam, with all that going, just being a mom of 5 young children is enough. And then doing all of that work to figure out treatments, psychosocial support. So how did CBTF come to be then?
So sitting in the clinic, this young woman came over to me and said, "We're doing a video. We're trying to raise money for research." And boom, like as soon as she said that, like, okay, where do I sign up? We want to do a research. We want to highlight 4 children. And would your daughter agree? And, we spoke to her about it, and she agreed. And we did this little video with highlighting 4 children. The idea was that they knew that 2 of them weren't going to make it, and 2 of them were. By the time the video was complete, my daughter was the only one who was alive. And it's a little emotional, but every single kid in the clinic in 1988, 89, 90, every single child that my daughter was treated with did not make it. My daughter was the only survivor, and she is the first cohort of survivors. I spoke to this young woman, Wendy Lobel, and she said, there's this group, they're meeting every Friday night. once a month, and they're trying to organize this foundation. And I said, okay, we're running a circus. We're going to sell tickets to the Big Apple Circus. We're going to raise money. I said, okay, sign me up. And I started selling tickets. I started raising money. Friday nights were a no-go for me. I was not ever available on a Friday night. And I told the person I was working with, I said, if you have a meeting on a weeknight, I will come. I promise you I will come. And I did. They did a Tuesday night meeting. I remember it was in Fred Adelman's office. And I think within like 3 months, they put me on the board. That was 1989. And I guess you might say that the rest is history. You know, I've been plugging along for these 35 years.
Well, that's amazing. It just shows the power of bringing parents and families together.
Absolutely.
So I know you said that one of the goals was research. What were some of the other early goals of CBTF?
Right. Okay, so we really, we started by raising money. We really didn't know what to do with it. And we had a fabulous advisor, Dr. Jeffrey Allen, who was the only neuro-oncologist on the East Coast at that time. We started by funding fellows because there weren't enough doctors who knew how to do this stuff. So we started by funding fellows. And many of those fellows are now running neuro-oncology programs all over the world. We started funding small grants. Because we felt that we didn't have money for a massive grant, but some of the seed grants we did actually ended up being funded by NIH. Around 1992, 93, we realized there was absolutely no information out there for families. And so we put together this very first book of resources for children, a resource guide for parents of children with brain and spinal cord tumors. And I wrote the first foreword. It was so exciting for me to be a part of this. There was a whole team of people who put it together because remember, no internet. We really wanted people to know what to do. And, what questions do you ask? What are questions you ask your doctor? What does this mean? What kind of, when my daughter was sick, I found a foundation in Chicago that gave me some information. I called up doctors who were kind and spoke to me. But that wasn't in the cards for everyone. And so our goals were figure out how to help people and figure out how to do research and fund it.
Wow. And we're getting ready to come out with our 7th edition. So thank you for initiating that and just giving people one place that they could go to get those questions answered.
Right. Well, now it's online. Now you can get that book. Now it's online. It's available. It's free. We were sending it out by mail to people, but now one can get it anytime, anywhere. It's available all over the world. We have a Spanish edition. We're correct?
Yep.
And I think do we have an Arabic edition yet?
We do.
Okay. So there you go.
And so you've talked a little bit about the research funding, but I know you told Beth and I a story that you just started to bring up when you were talking with the doctors when Raina was diagnosed.
Right. So
how did that research advance?
Okay. So one of the things that happened while Raina was being treated was there was a young lady in the clinic like her, same tumor, same age, same diagnosis, same everything, same treatment. That young lady relapsed while on treatment. And any parent sitting here knows what that feels like. And I spoke to the doctor and I said to him, looked straight in the eye and said, is Raina going to relapse too? Because this is what happened. And he said, he sighed. He said, under the microscope, both of those tumors really look the same. However, we know that at a more molecular level, at the DNA level, they probably are different. And we have no way of knowing what that is. It's really, DNA's research is now in its infancy. And if we could do that, and then he stopped a moment, he said, but the problem is we don't have that. You need a lot of tissue to do that. And, the doctors here will take out, a couple of medulloblastomas and then a craniopharyngioma and an ependymoma. Like, we don't have enough tissue to do that. It would take a massive effort and a massive influx of money to do that. I always had this thing in my head. And Jill, unfortunately, did not make it, the young lady who was diagnosed with my daughter and treated with my daughter. But I always had that in mind. And I used to joke that if I had been shopping for cancer for my child, I would have picked ALL, leukemia. That would have been my cancer of choice. if I had that choice. Obviously, it's a macabre joke, but why would I want ALL? Because ALL was in 1988, 70% curable, 20% of the kids went into remission to relapse later, and 10% didn't make it. And those were really good odds, considering that my odds were not anywhere near like that, my daughter's odds. But what happened around the early 90s was that with a lot of research in leukemia, and there was a lot of funding for that, the DNA studies revealed that there is a Philadelphia chromosome. 30% of children with ALL have that chromosome. And those children, it's a much more virulent type of leukemia, and those children need to be treated with bone marrow transplant at the get-go. They need a much more advanced and aggressive treatment. And once doctors shifted their thinking on this treatment, the ALL numbers went up to in the 90s. And I said, if we could do that, that would be amazing. At a certain point, we were kind of established and we were funding these small grants. We spoke to Peter Phillips, our then medical advisor, and said, what would be a game changer? What would really, really change things for CBTF and for us? Where really should we put our money? And he came back with this amazing proposal, $5 million proposal, saying a consortium of hospitals that would give that would send the tissue to one place where we could do DNA studies. And that light bulb went off in my head. And I said, that's what we want to do. And in 2008, we voted, right as the economy was crashing, we voted to adopt this program. It was called the Children's Brain Tumor Tissue Consortium. There were 3 hospitals that we had to beg to join. 3 hospitals. Today, this is now called the Children's Brain Tumor Network. It is funded by many other organizations. We aren't the only ones, but we birthed it, we started it. And we now have 28 member institutions sending their tissue to this brain tumor repository where it is lent out for research. Research is being done. There have been multiple studies published. There have been changes in treatment because of the consortium. We have 5 satellites, 28 members, 5 satellites, 32 total, and people are dying to get in. So I don't mean to say that that was a bad pun, but people really want to get, institutions want to get into this program. And that really is one of the most amazing things that we were able to focus on. We were also, I have to add that we were very much supported by the licensing industry. It was then called LIMA, Licensing Industry Merchandisers Association, now called Licensing International, and they were huge supporters of this program.
And what a game changer. I know at CBTF, we always say that we're stronger together. And I think CBTN is just another example of it can't be done alone. So that's such amazing work. But a $5 million ask, that's huge.
We didn't have it.
Tell us about the changing in fundraising, because I'm sure 1988 you were doing circus. How's the fundraising?
So we've changed a lot. We've changed a lot all along the way. We started with the Big Apple Circus. We had a couple of dinner dances in Long Island they were supported by the trades in the building industry. We had a number of walkathons. Our first walkathon was with Memorial Sloan Kettering, and then we did our own standalones. We had an art event at Oheka Castle. We've done Texas Hold'ems. There was a Fall Fesh, which was a program run by the Hennessy Foundation in memory of Andrew Hennessy, who was a wonderful supporter of CBTF. And they would have their annual golf outing. They called it the Fall Fesh, and they would support us. In 2003, we engaged Charlotte Simon Productions to do a gala, which morphed into the Dream and Promise Gala. She's been doing that now almost every year. We hope to have that again. It brought in a lot of corporate sponsorship. It has raised, I guess, in total, in all the years that she's done it, it's brought in about $14 million, which really made it possible for us to now look not only at research, but also what else needs to be done. And this harks back to what I felt when my daughter was diagnosed, was where do I get support from my siblings? Where do I get support from my daughter? Where do I get support from myself? What do I tell parents? Because it took us a while till we even hired a social worker. What do I tell parents who are bereaved? How do I counsel them? Because we were doing it as volunteers. And the fundraising, all of it, every single thing that has been done has enabled us to expand our reach for our families. And we are now really the best known, even though research is our core, we are best known for the patient education and support that we offer for families all over the world. We were doing a lot of stuff in person. In 2020, obviously, we went to virtual, and that actually made it, even though it's difficult to be far, it made it possible to reach many more people. Even our gala went virtual, our Dream and Promise Gala went virtual. And then, of course, there's this Webathon, which, you know, as a board, we sat around looking at each other on Zoom saying, now what? We have every single program going on. We have families all over the world counting on us. How are we going to meet that need? And bam, the Webathon was born, and here we are. That's how fundraising has changed.
Well, I just saw Delaney put in the chat about your perseverance and dedication, several people, and just Miriam. It's really priceless that for 35 years, you've just been such a huge part of what CBTF does. What do you think, what do you think some of the greatest achievements of CBTF?
Wow. I think our crowning achievement was the Children's Brain Tumor Network. I think that totally was a game changer, but I don't want to ignore all of the small grants that we awarded, because it made it possible for people to go into this field. So nurturing those people who went into this field, and the camps, and the support groups, and the bereavement group, and all of the needs that are being met. I can't even, you know, I work in social services as an advocate, and some of the stuff we do get great feedback back. And those are parents who are struggling with kids who are having trouble in school. All right, let's put that on steroids. A parent who is struggling because their child has a brain tumor, a life-threatening illness. So that what we've been able to do for parents and for families and for children, I think that's right up there with the research. I can't even tell you which is more important, because they're both so important.
Agreed. I think when we say cure isn't enough, we really do need to be there for the family throughout that whole journey. So just one last question, because in 35 years, we're going to bring you back for the same interview, Miriam. And we're wondering, what do you want to see happen in the next 35 years?
Okay. Yeah. You asked me this question and I had to come up with it. Well, obviously more research and less toxic treatments, because, you know, I didn't mention in my own story that, you know, about 25 years in, because it's now 35 years that my daughter's a survivor, about 20 some years in, my daughter started hitting some really serious health issues. And now she's really been hit by some very grave, life-threatening and life-altering health issues due to her treatment. It's important to say that in those days, nobody had any idea. Nobody had any idea what would be. Nobody could tell me, well, you know, these horrible things are going to happen to her in the future. I knew that if she didn't have treatment, we wouldn't even be talking about a future. So we treated her. We did not know that there would be long-term side effects. And again, she was the first cohort of survivors. So everything that they're learning now from her life is being used to help other children. So really less toxic treatments. Obviously, the thing I would love to say is, you know what? We cured it and nobody needed us anymore. We closed up shop and we all went on with our lives. And that would obviously be the best thing. But I really wish that this diagnosis became a relic of the past. But if not, we really want less toxic treatments, more support for our families, and a cure. That's what we want.
Well, I think with all of your dedication, motivation, inspiration, Miriam, I think that will happen. It's going to take a lot of people willing to invest in research funding, but let's all keep that in mind. And don't forget, you can donate to the link in the chat. But before we go into Miriam, you want to introduce her? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Before I introduce, okay, I want to say something, and that is, there is no way that this foundation would have happened if not for the work and incredible work. I mean, yes, I've been around for 35 years, There have been years when I worked very, very hard. I remember sitting as a young mom, because I had a son after Raina got better. I had a son, and I had 6 kids. I had this baby at home, and I'm negotiating a $250,000 as president, $250,000 matching grant with NYU Medical Center. That was like, what am I doing here? There's dishes in the sink at home. Why am I doing this thing? I could not have done any of that without the support of all of the people who have served on the board. And I did work. Yes, there are many people who did more work than me, who brought their wealth, wisdom, and work. So many board members over the years, and so many board members now, the incredible staff. So yes, it looks real exciting, but I gotta say, it wasn't me. It really was everyone who worked with me and everyone who pushed us all along. There's no way we could have done this without everyone. And there's also no way we could have done this without the support of everyone who has donated to CBTF, whether it's corporate, whether it's a couple of dollars. This is how it gets done. This is how it gets done. It gets done with the support of everyone. So yes, it might look real exciting that I did all this, but it really wasn't me. It really was everyone who worked with me. Lionel, Stacia, working with both of you as well. It's and every person on the board, every person on the staff. So and thank you all for the privilege of having been able to do this. It's not a thing, it's a privilege to be able to do this work.
Well, we are honored to get to work with you, and you're right, the board and certainly the team, just an amazing group of people, but it's the people in the audience and the families who really are what keep us going. Okay, I'll let you introduce the video from another board member and her son.
Okay, so I would like to introduce my good friend and colleague, Linda Wachtel, and her son, Tory. Linda has been an integral part of our CBTF community, not just as a board member, contributing incredible work and wisdom, but as a driver of our patient programs that have become our signature in the world of families facing this diagnosis. Please watch Linda and Tory.
My name is Tory Wachtel. I'm 37 years old and I'm from New Jersey. I was diagnosed in 1987 and I've been in remission for 29 years.
Yeah, you were on and off of treatment from the time you were 19 months old until you were 8.5 years old. There was no expectation of survivorship back then. There was hope, right? But there's a difference between hope and real expectation. I remember in the early years, in the late 80s and early 90s, when I would speak sometimes with oncologists about being hopeful, I would have oncologists say to me, "You do understand your child is going to die of this tumor. You need to understand that." And I would say to them, "Oh, I understand that. But I can't do as a parent what I have to do without having real reason for hope." And this was our first child. We didn't expect this, you know. There were no clear chemotherapy protocols to choose from. There was no treatment course that was clear. It was just figuring it out with our physicians. So between the ages of 19 months and 8.5 years, there were so many surgeries, I lost count. It was more than 20.
I mean, I do remember that, like, you know, there was, the doctors would always say, like, I was always, like, out of the hospital before they wanted me to be. You know, I was like, I'm not gonna be here.
That is true. Tory was a real fighter in every sense of the word. He didn't want to be in the hospital. He really let it be known, and we pushed to get him out of there and to be home as much as possible. That is true.
I was diagnosed so young, and really I didn't have a life before the brain tumor, that I was sort of always aware of it. It wasn't like, you know, if you're 18 and you get diagnosed with a brain tumor, your life gets thrown upside down. But for me, my life was always, I have a brain tumor, and I wasn't even really walking before my brain tumor. I've never not been able to do anything, but there's, you know, like my balance is affected, so there's some things there are things that I can't do as well as people, and like I was always aware of it, so it never changed anything. After college and after grad school, finding a job was sort of hard because no matter how great of a candidate people thought I was, there was always that question of, well, he had a brain tumor, so, you know, we can't really take the chance of committing to hiring him over hiring someone who doesn't have any issues. I feel like I've always been more mature, and I think I've always had more of a perspective than other people my age, and I think that has been beneficial.
There have been lots of obstacles. He doesn't choose to think about them in that way. That's really one of his strengths. I would say I'm most proud of his attitude, his resilience, his will, his hopefulness, his the way he lives his life.
A diagnosis today especially doesn't mean the end of the world, and that, you know, there is probably today more than ever you can live a completely normal life.
Linda, the explanation that you gave about hope versus expectations is a concept that I'm sure many people can relate to. And Tory, your fighting strength and determination are apparent. So thank you for your honesty. Congratulations on your life accomplishments. And we are so thankful for the Wachtel family and the constant difference that they make in the brain tumor community.